Yep, my name is Tom. On Instagram, it's Tommy Flies a Lot, and Tommy Flies on YouTube. And I am a commercial pilot. I'm working on a career change right now. So I'm a professional engineer at the moment, but hopefully in the near future sometime I'll transition into being a professional pilot. That's the goal.
Tom, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Pilot to Pilot podcast.
Thanks, Justin.
Happy to have you on, man. I always feel like I almost 50% of the time, I feel like the first thing I say after welcome is, man, it's been a long time coming. We've been talking, we've been messaging, trying to make this happen. But Today we are here. The timing has worked out. I think we both just talked here. We're both in the Carolinas. Look outside. It's not the nicest day out. Maybe it's going to rain here soon. So probably not much flying for you going on right now, but
it's actually gorgeous down here, man.
Is it?
Yeah, we got sunny skies. It's windy today, but it's nice weather here for
when
sure.
You're talking to me, you could be flying your Mooney right now. What are you doing? Get out of here.
Yeah, I got too much. I got friends coming in from out of town today, so no flying today, but we'll be doing a lot this weekend. So.
Cool, dude. Well, that's awesome. The first thing I want to talk about is the first question I ask everyone. Why aviation? What was it about aviation that got you interested in the first place?
So I've been, I don't want to say obsessed, but I've been just about obsessed with aviation since I was a little kid. And I'm a first generation aviator. So when I was younger, it was all flight simulator and RC aircrafts, things like that. But yeah, just since I was very, very young, I've always loved aviation.
What was it about aviation that you loved, especially with no one in there to kind of help you foster it? Was it just kind of like you said, like you just looked up, you're like, planes are cool. And then, I can play this video game. I can fly this RC plane.
Yeah, I don't really know where it came from. Like I said, I was just naturally drawn to it as a young kid. It was, I did a lot of model rockets too with my uncle, things like that. And, I was just naturally drawn to aviation. I wanted to go to school for it actually. And was actually talked out of it by the college. I went to Southern Illinois University, which is an aviation school.
They talked you out of it?
And they talked me out of it. Yeah, I went there and they looked at my math scores from high school and like, oh, you're really good at math. You should be an engineer. And I was a young kid and they're like, yeah, the aviation market's terrible. You could just fly later. And, they're like, don't go to school for aviation. And I was like, okay. And so I changed my major and went to school for engineering and, worked out. But yeah, I was talked out of it.
Dang. I mean, was this 2000, early mid 2000s at time or late 2000s?
Yeah, it was 2008.
Okay. Yeah, so I started college around the same time, and terrible time to go in aviation. No one was hiring for pilots. There's CFIs are making $8,000 to $10,000 a year.
Oh yeah.
You had to have 4,000 hours to be a regional pilot, or even like a CFI. It was crazy, way different than it is right now. But times changed, and their advice necessarily wasn't the wrong advice, because we always say, hey, have a backup plan, which you have a very good backup plan. I guess this would become your current job would become your next backup plan if anything went to crap with the market. So you have a successful way to make money if you need to, but maybe it just delayed you becoming a pilot for a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I always tell people, it gave me insight into what else there is, right? Yeah. So now I know for sure, right, after 15 years of working, for a large company and as an engineer, now I know for sure that that's not what I want to do. And, when I'm finally sitting in the cockpit, I'll know, that's what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? So
what would your advice be to people that are in a similar situation as you? Someone that always wanted to be a pilot, maybe they just didn't have the money to do it at an early age. Maybe they had to wait to put 15 years into work to be able to afford the life that they want. But what advice would you give to someone that is thinking about making the switch, but is just hesitant? Because as you know, life just gets comfortable, right? Like you have money, it's safe or safer than transitioning jobs to a career like aviation. I think you have a couple kids, you have a wife, and it can be very comfortable, very scary to move. So what kind of encouragement would you give to someone, and what would you say to someone that's thinking about making this decision?
Yeah, well, I haven't completed it yet, so I haven't been successful in that goal, although I'm on my way. So, but what I would say is exactly what you said. You have to do it. It's really easy when you've got a cushy job, you're making good money. I can continue this role for the rest of my life. The company I work for will be there forever. I could work my way up there and make a really decent living. It's just not, I wouldn't be happy doing it. So, my advice would be just to do it. And I went a very unique route into aviation. I didn't go to a flight school and rent airplanes. I was, like I said, obsessed with aviation prior to learning how to fly. So I was able to go out and buy my own airplane before I had a license. So I found an airplane. It was a Cessna 150. I knew that I wouldn't be able to afford to rent an aircraft. And then I knew that after I got my license, I wouldn't be able to afford to stay current. So I knew I had to own my own aircraft. So I had to wait to have the means to do that. So I delayed it even further. I waited until I had the money to buy the airplane, then found a CFI, taught me how to fly on it, and I've upgraded obviously since then. But that would be my advice probably. If money is going to be an issue, buying an airplane and learning how to fly it is the best route. Now there's risk involved with that. Obviously, you're responsible for the maintenance. Aircraft ownership is a whole thing. But for me, like I said, it was something I knew I wanted to do. I'm also pretty mechanically inclined, so I'm able to do a lot of the work myself, under the supervision of A&Ps and things like that. So it worked for me. It may not work for everyone, but like I said, it worked out. So
what was the purchase price of the 150 that you got?
I bought it for just over $30,000, and I sold it a year later, just under a year. So I didn't even have to annual the aircraft. I bought it right out of annual for $30,000. A year later, I sold it right before annual for $31,000, and I put $200 on it. So, yeah, I mean, there was some maintenance, in there, but nothing huge. It was like a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. So, yeah, it was essentially 1,000 hours or 200 hours for free.
What was there a sell to buy a new airplane, or was it just like, all right, this is too small for what I need to get something bigger?
Yeah, I knew I had to sell it because I was, second I got my pilot's license, I flew it around a little bit. I knew I wanted to get right into my instrument training, and I didn't want to outfit the Cessna for that. So, yeah, I ended up finding a Mooney out in Seattle that was also pretty cheap. I think the first Mooney was just under, or right around $50,000, which was a really good deal. And me and my buddy got a one-way ticket out to Seattle. We're in Charleston, so that's across the country, and just
it is.
Sight unseen. I bought the plane. I mean, I had it pre-buy and things like that, but first time we saw the plane was the day that we flew it all the way across the country back to Charleston. So it was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. What a good journey for your friend. Is he in aviation at all, or was this kind of just like, hey man, I bought a plane, let's go? Yeah,
no, he's a pilot.
Oh, cool.
I needed him to come with me because I was not instrument rated at the time, and I knew that we would be, we wanted to be able to fly in the weather if we had to. So I brought him with. I actually credit him. Shout out to my buddy Lee for convincing me to buy the airplane in the first place, because I always thought that an airplane would be later on in life. I was like, I'll never be able to afford an airplane. That'll be a retirement goal of mine. And my buddy was like, dude, you can afford an airplane. And I was like, no, I can't. He's like, yes, no, you can afford an airplane. He laid it all out for me and showed me. And I was like, holy crap, I can afford an airplane. So I bought my first airplane, which was the Cessna. And then him and I flew out to Seattle together, and we're still good buddies. So
I love it. That's awesome. So you bought you bought the Cessna, then you bought the Mooney. Yeah. Looking back on it, do you wish you just would have saved a little bit more and just gone all in on a bigger airplane that was going to be more suited for as you progressed in your training? Or did you, if you go back, would you do the same thing, buy the 152 and then move into the Mooney a year later?
Yeah, I would do the same thing. I thought about that beforehand. I didn't want to jump into something complex with retracts for a bunch of reasons. One, it's harder to learn on, and two, insurance is crazy on that for a 0-hour pilot.
Oh, that's a good point.
And the Cessna 150 I knew is a proven aircraft. The engine in it was proven. You can still get parts for it. Mechanics know how to work on it. And it's simple and easy to fly. And so that checked all the boxes. I didn't want to make the learning process any more complex than it had to be. So that is one thing I tell people to if you have an opportunity to jump into something for a good deal, maybe do it. But if you can go the route of flying something simple to begin with, that would help me. That would help.
There's so much to when you're first learning how to fly. And even when you're going in IFR, I'm sure it was a little bit of a difference for you, like having to wrap everything around, put everything together, and also remember to put the gear up, remember to do the other things. It's there's a lot going on, and then add more steps of what you need to do can just make everything a little bit more harder, and it just delay you like a lesson or two. But like it's just something else you got to think of, especially if you're thinking about buying your own plane or renting your own plane. Because you know how it is when you go to the FBO, they're like, all right, we got this 152 for whatever this wet, or with the instructor, this is the price of it. Or we got this Cirrus over here, or we got this, this Arrow over here. And you're like, ooh, I like the Arrow. But it's like, yeah, but you got to learn way more, and you got to do 25 squared. You got to remember, you got to remember so many more things. Sometimes it just keep it simple, stupid, right? Like the
there's a lot to do in a complex aircraft. But when I fly, even with my airline buddies, they're so used to, just like you guys are so used to, the big jets, things like that. When you get in these small complex aircraft, you're turning knobs, twisting this. I've got the manual gear lever and the manual flaps, and after takeoff, my buddy Andy is a Delta pilot. He's like, man, I don't know what the hell you're doing in here. It's like, there's so much to do after takeoff. I'm like, yeah, like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot that you forget when you kind of make your way into the career. So you think you think it's going to be super complicated when you get to, I mean, it can be complicated, right? Yeah. But you just forget so much of what it was like flying GA, and so many airline pilots don't ever get back into GA, it's kind of a shame. You think that you're always going to have the opportunity to fly these planes and you're going to make way more money, but it's still expensive. Doesn't matter if you're making 400 grand, if you're making 30 grand, or don't even have an income, and you're just paying for training with loans. It's still going to be expensive. You're not going to want to rent the airplane. And as you make more money, most people spend more money. So you usually end up having more expensive on top of that.
Exactly.
Talking about your training, how did training go for you?
It was uneventful, which is good. Like I said, I reached out to a local flight school just because I knew that they would know CFIs, and said, hey, do you got anyone who knows how to fly a 150 or has time in a 150? And they had one instructor. His name was Chris. We're still friends now, and he's actually a Part 130. I think he flies for NetJets now. But
oh, nice.
And yeah, they hooked me up with him, and we got along great, which is an important thing to me. Obviously, if you're sitting in a cockpit with somebody for 40, 50 hours, whatever it is, you want to make sure you guys mesh and get along, and your learning styles match. That's another important thing. Yeah. And it went great, and we did a lot of fun stuff. Since I owned the aircraft, we could take it, kind of wherever we wanted. We'd go to fly-ins together, and we'd log time that way. Then for my instrument training, I just went on Facebook and tried to find a local CFII that could teach me, and ended up getting lucky again, found a good instructor. I stayed with him through my commercial. And then for my commercial multi, I went to a kind of an accelerated course. I think it was 3 days.
Nice.
In a Baron, and it was with some very well-known DPE and a CFI, Roger and Zenda. I know people listening to the podcast will know who they are, but I went to them, and they were awesome. That was a lot of fun too.
I've heard of Zenda before.
Yeah. She's done a lot of check rides, and I always brag about it because we were flying together, and she had me do steep turns in the check ride, and I did my steep turns, and I swear to God, that needle didn't move a foot. It was the best steep turns I've ever done in my life. I played it off like I always did that, but she's like, man, those are the best steep turns I've ever seen someone do in the Baron. And it was a huge compliment. But I surprised myself. I didn't tell her that, but yeah.
That's funny. I always do worse with compliments. Like if you're on a check ride and someone gives me a compliment, like I'll mess something up 5 minutes later. She'll be like, right? Are you kidding me? What was that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. She was, I think she's pretty well known in the Carolina area. Like I think she does a lot of the check rides. I did all my check rides in North Carolina with Joey Rogers out of Florence, South Carolina.
Yeah, I know.
So I used to fly from Monroe. I remember my, what was I flying? I was flying the Arrow. I think it was like Arrow 201 or just over high performance, and flew down to Florence, did my commercial check ride, then flew back, and then did the same thing with my multi-engine with my instructor. So yeah, I had a lot of time down there. But great instructors, great DPs down in the area.
Yep, for sure.
North Carolina is a great place to train. If anyone wants to come down, you don't have to go to Florida. Just go to North Carolina or South Carolina.
That's where Zenda was too. She was in North Carolina. I flew up there to do it. So
yep. So you're doing your training. You're kind of learning how to fly. Now today, you say your goal is to fly professionally. You want to make the career change. But when you were doing this, was this just for love, just for fun, for passion?
Yeah, it started that way. So I started my aviation career flying paramotors, actually.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, and for those that are listening and don't know what that is, it's a paraglider, which is like a kind of a parachute, more efficient. And then you just wear an engine on your back.
Casual, just strap an engine on your back.
Yeah, it always sounds crazier than it is. It's actually a very mundane and safe way to fly. I actually just sold my paramotor this week, so it's gone.
Nice.
Just hadn't had time to fly it, but I started flying that once I discovered that in 2000 and when was it? 15. And that's what made aviation accessible to me. So it was, I was into motorcycles and dirt bikes and things like that, and then I found paramotoring, and I was like, that's what I'm doing. There's no question. Everyone thought, I was crazy because it wasn't as popular as it is now. But I got into paramotoring. Got pretty good at it. I ended up being sponsored by a paramotor company at one point, which helped me, get gear and things like that. I flew on the Paradigm aerobatics team, which was a lot of fun. We actually performed at Sun and Fun one year during the night show in front of 30,000 people. It was awesome. So I had a lot of fun doing that, and I kind of think that I'll probably go back to it one day. But that's how I got started in aviation. So it was just for joy. And then, like I said, once I realized that I could finally afford the airplane, then I started thinking to myself, well, I might be able to actually achieve this goal that I had kind of put out of my mind, which was that I wanted to fly for a living. And so once I saw it in front of me, then I made the decision, like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And it worked out.
Yeah. What is the goal right now? Is it specific to airlines? Is it charter? Is it 135? Do you have it kind of defined?
So in my ideal scenario, I'd like to do like corporate aviation for someone local to Charleston. That'd be the goal. I can't move, which is unfortunate. I know that makes it harder to find a job in aviation because my wife and kids love it here. My wife is killing it as well in Charleston, so I'm not going to uproot them. So if I could get a corporate gig here, that would be awesome. I wouldn't say no to the airlines. If I could make that happen, I will. So I'm keeping my options open at the moment. Luckily, I don't have to make that decision yet. I've only got 900 hours total time.
Yeah, still got some time.
I've got a little bit of time before I have to start actually thinking about it. But if I could even get a gig flying skydivers, something like that, I'm sending resumes out now trying to get just some work that way. And I'm varying aircraft when I get the chance. So.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, you live in a great spot because, if you choose Delta, Atlanta's not too far away. If you choose American, eventually go to Charlotte. That's not too far away. I think they're both probably an hour flight in the Mooney, maybe less than that, depending on how fast you want to go.
Yep.
So if you want to commute by airplane, there you go.
Yep.
But and then NetJets, FlexJet, fractionals. I don't know FlexJet's style of basing. I know before I left the 135 corporate world, they changed it a little bit. So it's not truly home basing anymore from what I remembered, but NetJets is a great option as well. But you have time. You have time to figure it out. What's really fun is saying yes to the opportunities that come up, and we might do an interview in 2 years, and you might be flying the Goodyear blimp somehow. It just like worked out. It's like you never know what could come up, and I would challenge you to not be afraid to say yes to something that obviously gives you the opportunity to stay at home, so you keep your kids there. And talk about loving South Carolina. I mean, Charleston's one of my favorite places in the whole world outside of summertime. Summertime in Charleston is one of the most brutal places you would ever be. Yeah. But, you got water, you got pools, you can make it work, and you got a plane, you can go fly somewhere else if you want to.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's really cool that you were able to finally do this and you're able to finally make this become a reality because so many people just love aviation. And I say that because whenever I go somewhere with my wife being a doctor, all the doctors, they don't want to talk about medicine. They want to talk about aviation. They want to talk about being a pilot. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't talk about this anymore.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that you're able to actually make that a goal and a reality.
Yeah. I'm enjoying the journey. That is for sure. Yeah. We're like I said, we with the Mooney, I can take the family places too. So we go back to Chicago, which is where we're from,
nice.
A couple times a year. And it's fun. I'm trying to enjoy the journey at the moment.
That's all you can do. And if you can enjoy the journey, then you're going to enjoy where you go because you're going to find out that usually what you think the hard parts are right now are the most enjoyable parts and the fondest memories you're going to have in aviation.
Yep.
What part of Chicago?
Northwest suburbs.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar, like Crystal Lake, Algonquin area.
I lived in Oak Park for 4 years, and my wife went to med school in Chicago.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah, everybody followed me to South Carolina, so my folks live here now, and like Smart. I said, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, there's no way. I do not miss the Chicago winters. Sorry to all my Chicago friends. You should move, especially for the winter times, because the winters in the Carolinas are the best. It's hard to beat.
The summers in the Midwest are amazing, but the winters are brutal.
It still got hot sometimes. It still got hot and humid, but nothing like the extent that it does here. But I'll take the hot and humid over, it's March and you're getting another 18-inch snowstorm and you're just like, holy smokes. And then the next week you get tornadoes. It's like, what is going on?
Yep.
Yeah. What was it like with the family, with the lifestyle change of telling your wife, like, hey, I'm actually going to go be a pilot. Was she totally on board at first, or was she kind of hesitant?
No, I mean, my wife's amazing. We've actually been together for, she's going to kill me, I don't know, 17 or 18 years, very long time. We were high school sweethearts. So
Nice.
I don't even know how long we've been married. We've been married for a big portion of that as well.
We can cut that out, don't worry.
Yeah, no, you can leave it. She knows. If she asks me our wedding anniversary, I have to think pretty hard about it. But
That's funny.
no, she's great. I support her 100%. Anything she wants to do, and she supports me 100%. Obviously, when I came home one day and I was like, I'm gonna go buy an airplane, I kind of spring that kind of stuff on her. I think about it in my head for a long time before I let her know that I've been thinking about this. And she was kind of like, "What are you talking about? You're gonna buy an airplane?" So that was a shock to her. But once I told her that this is my goal and this is what I want to do, there's no question.
What was, does she have a fear of getting in airplanes at all? Was it pretty easy sell when you told her you're going to buy one? She's like, all right, you're crazy, but I trust you. I believe you.
She's not afraid of flying, but her fear came from us both being in an aircraft at the same time. And if something goes wrong, then what happens to the kids?
Yeah.
So she's not afraid of the actual act of flying. But, like I said, we fly together now, but before we ever flew together, she made us, draft a will and all that stuff, make sure it was all laid out what exactly is going to happen. So, like I said, she's not afraid to fly, but was very nervous about it just because of the boys.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a genius thing to think about, and very smart on her end.
Yeah.
That's something that if I ever bought an airplane, my wife would do too. We might be similar, but it's like, we don't think about the whole picture. We don't think about everything. We just think about plane, flying, fun. Let's go. It's like, well, okay, sit down for a second. We need to make sure there's a plan, just in case we need to make sure anything does happen. We know where our kids are going to go.
Yep. Yeah. Now she doesn't even think about it. Right. She gets in the plane and falls asleep before we're off the runway. And same thing with the boys. It's just another day to them. It's just the car to them. They don't. Yeah. The act of flying is, they're spoiled, but
that's awesome. As someone, I've followed your Instagram for a while now, and I've seen you post how buying an airplane is more affordable than what a lot of people think. Can you talk a little about that? Talk about, I think it was your buddy Lee who explained it to you. Kind of talk about what he explained and what made it finally click in your head that this is an actual opportunity and you can actually buy an airplane.
Well, there's a lot of avenues into it. And like I said, I'm most familiar with the avenue I took, but you can finance aircraft. So if you can afford a nice truck, then you can probably afford an airplane, at least some type of airplane. Yeah. That's what I always tell people. It has to be something you want to do though, because obviously flying is expensive, the fuel is expensive, the maintenance is expensive. If you get a hangar, it just it has to be something you really want to do, and it can't be a kind of a passing hobby or something like that. And that in my opinion, it's unsafe also. If you're not going to be all in and you're going to fly infrequently, or you're not, willing to, like I said, go all in, then it's a safety issue too. But, that's the first one is you can finance. And secondly, like I said, I bought my first aircraft for $30,000. So, that's not terrible. A lot of people think airplanes are, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and some of them are. But there are smaller aircraft or deals out there, especially too, that you can get into. And even my Mooney, I'm on my second Mooney now, and I own it with someone, right? So my first two aircraft I own by myself, and the second Mooney, the one I'm in now, I own with another person, which cuts the cost of everything in half, which makes it even more affordable. So there's ways into it that are not that expensive. The other thing I do, and I'm very fortunate about this or for this, is I work with a mechanic who lets me do a lot of the work myself.
Nice.
Under his supervision. So I do owner-assisted annuals in my own hangar, right? So he'll be there, tell me what to do, and I'll turn the wrenches and do the actual work, and that saves me a ton of money. So I get charged for the annual inspection cost and the parts I use, but a lot of the labor I'm doing. Now I take 2 or 3 days off of work every year. I plan it in my vacation every year to do my annual inspection. Hopefully that's all it takes, but that's another part too. I save a lot of money by doing that all myself. And if I had to pay someone to do that, it'd be a lot more expensive.
When you say something like that, so when you are doing the actual labor for it, you have an AMP that's kind of watching over you. Is it like actually them like sitting in the hangar, be like, all right, so this is what you need to do, and they watch everything you do, or do they tell you what you need to fix? You fix it, then they come one day and they check it to make sure everything's tight?
It depends on the A&P, and the regs are clear about this. And there's actually a big, I don't know, hoopla going on right now about this, where I forget what the regs say, and I forget which one it is, but essentially it says that the A&P needs to be available for consultation when necessary.
Okay.
And in today's world, that just means, it could mean FaceTime, things like that. But the FAA just issued a legal interpretation of that statement, and it says that the A&P has to be there with you doing the work. And a lot of people are fighting that right now because it makes no sense. And it also makes it harder for A&Ps to train other A&Ps, because that's how you get your training, is you work under an A&P for X amount of hours, and then you go take your test. So and if the A&P has to be over your shoulder the entire time, it's not feasible. So the way it works for us, obviously I've been working with him for years now, so he knows my skill level and knows what I can do, and he trusts me to do the work correctly. And then if I don't know something, I'll ask him too. I'll say, hey, I don't know how to do this, or could you give me a hand? And he'll walk over to the hangar and do those things with me. And then obviously the final inspection is all him, right? He makes sure that every time I do something, he checks it over, make sure it's done correctly, and then I can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things that the FAA, like in this instance, how I interpret what the FAA is doing is out of good, like they think this is the right thing to do, right? They're like, this makes sense, right? Like, yeah, you need an A&P to be there, but they don't think the practicality of it. Like, all right, well, we don't have a ton of A&Ps. We don't have enough for every single aircraft owner to be able to do this, or the cost is just too much for this to actually happen, and people can't afford to do this. But at the same time, it is nice to have the oversight, and you in theory, you want an A&P to be there at all times. It's just not practical, right? Like, it's just not possible for every single person to do that. And if you don't want to do it, like me, if I own an airplane, I'm not going to be the one doing the maintenance on my airplane. I'd be flying, be like, wait, did I tighten that all the way? Like, oh crap.
Yeah.
When you're owning your own airplane, and you had the second Mooney, we'll go with that. But you finally bought the second Mooney, and now you're on your second Mooney now. Do you think this is your forever aircraft, or you think you're going to continue to try to build as your mission grows with your family?
I would keep it if I could. I love the Mooney. The only thing is the as my family grows, I'll outgrow the useful load of the aircraft.
Yeah.
So the back seats in the Mooney, I can fit adults back there, but it's tight, and then the weight becomes an issue, right? As the kids grow, we can take less and less bags, and eventually it'll be at the point where we won't be able to take trips together. So I don't know what's next for me. I don't know. Maybe it's an A36 Bonanza.
There you go.
Something like that. Something with 6 seats where they can stretch out a little bit in the back.
Yeah.
I think that might be attainable at one point. But
you're getting into more expensive aircraft, though. I've been on Barnstormers, and I'm not finding any A36s for $30,000 or $40,000.
Yeah, they're expensive. I mean, like I said, this Mooney I'm in now is not cheap either. So it's fractional ownership.
Yeah.
Me and one other guy. So maybe that is the way I go in the future, is own a Bonanza with somebody, which would be fine. But yeah, eventually we'll grow out of it. It'll be unfortunate because the Mooney's great. I cruise 150 knots plus, and that's true. And so I can get 155, 156 out of it if I push it. And that's burning, and then, but if I'm going easy and I'm flying 150 true, I'll burn just below 9 gallons an hour. And I've got a 900-pound useful load in it, so it's a great aircraft. It's only got 4 cylinders, so the maintenance is cheaper.
Yeah,
it's got a manual gear, manual flaps, everything like that. So I
love manual flaps. Big fan.
Great airplane.
Yeah, big fan of manual flaps.
Me too.
Is it a Johnson bar?
Yep, Johnson bar gear.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's really it's the perfect plane, I think.
Yeah,
if it just had a little more room.
Moonies have never been known to be the most spacious aircraft in the world. I'm 6'2". I've sat in one Mooney, and I think it was the J model, and I can make it work, but I don't think I could have someone sitting behind me. So it essentially make my 4-seat plane a 3-seat plane, and that's not ideal unless it's just me, my wife, and Emmett, and that works out. But yeah. But yeah, Moonies are great. Have you had any issues when you were transitioning to the Mooney? It's a much faster airplane. Moonies are it's very important you have your speeds right when you're coming into land. If you're too fast, there's a lot of videos out there of Moonies overrunning 4,000 or 5,000 foot runways. So, do you have any issues at all when you were figuring it all out?
Yeah, and so my buddy owned a Mooney Lee that I was talking about earlier before this, so I did get to fly in one a little bit, and pick his brain about it, and all those things you said I knew before I bought the Mooney, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of that stuff is pilots not knowing how to fly it. So that was one thing I budgeted for when I bought the Mooney. I budgeted to hire somebody who knew how to fly Moonies. So it was somebody from a company called Mooney Pros.
Cool.
I paid him to come out and train me to fly the Mooney for 2 or 3 days, I think it was. And that was the best money I ever spent. So, I mean, he taught me everything he knew about the aircraft, how to fly it. We pushed it to the limits that I would not go to on my own, or that, a CFI that didn't understand Moonies would go to. But that was, yeah, like I said, the best money I spent transitioning into the Mooney. Even though I did that, I took it easy for a long time. I didn't take passengers for a long time, especially, my wife and kids. They didn't go in the Mooney for a very long time after I owned it. And, you mentioned things like overrunning the runway. Everyone says the Moonies float down the runway. And that's true if you don't honor your V speeds, right? For me, it's 80 miles per hour over the numbers, not 85, not 82. It's 80 miles an hour over the threshold. And if you're not on 80, you will float down the runway. In my plane. So, but if you're disciplined about that, it's an easy aircraft to fly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that when you get scared of an airplane because of so many things that have happened, it's not the airplane's fault. It's the people flying a lot of times. Now, there's obviously circumstances that things can happen. It can be the air, or something can happen where it's not the pilot's fault. I'm not trying to blame pilots for any kind of issues that have happened in the past of Moonies, but once you truly understand how the airplane flies, and there's a lot of planes like this. I think the Lancer is another plane where there's a lot of, I think it's based to final turns where people just do steep spirals because it's too slow. So maintaining your speed is huge in any airplane you fly, and it gets more important the bigger airplanes you fly. You fly jets, you got to be on speed. You got to be stable. You got to be all this. So learning in a plane like a Mooney, or learning to be stable as early as your 150 or 172 is just a incredible skill to have to carry on for your whole career and your whole flight training.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you a story too. After flying the Cessna for so long, an hour flight in the Cessna was, I don't know what it was, but it was X amount of distance, right, from my home base.
Maybe Myrtle Beach.
yeah, it'd probably get me there.
Yeah.
So, after I had the Mooney, I was, I had a couple hours in the morning, and I go to do a flight. And I checked the weather, and the weather is degrading as the day goes on, but it's not supposed to get bad until, later on in the afternoon. So I'm thinking, okay, I have time, and I go fly, not used to or anticipating how fast the Mooney was compared to the Cessna. So an hour flight out, I was really far away from home, and then the weather came in faster than it was forecasted to by a lot, like, I don't know, hours ahead of what it was forecasted to. And so I'm far away from home. I'm not instrument rated at this time. The ceiling is dropping, and the tops are rising. And I'm getting pushed up by the tops, and there's no holes underneath me, and I'm freaking out. I'm running low on fuel, and it was all because I didn't anticipate the fact that I'd be so far away in this now much faster aircraft. It ended okay, but I was so shaken up from it. Very long story short, I found a hole in the clouds. I spiraled down through it. And I just skirted, treetops basically to find the airport that was nearby. I used ForeFlight to find it, and I landed the plane, and I left it there. Like I said, I was an hour and a half from home. I called my stepdad. I was like, "Hey man, you got to come get me. I can't fly anymore." Even though the weather started improving after that, I was so shaken up from making that very poor decision, and like I said, running low on fuel and being above the clouds, not instrument rated, and it was scary, but like I said, I just didn't anticipate how far the Mooney would take me compared to the Cessna.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we learn how to be the best pilot possible by either making the mistakes ourselves or hearing about someone that has made a mistake in the past. It's not something you ever want to do. It's not something you ever want to happen, to be in that position and choose wrong or push safety or just kind of not really understand what you're getting yourself into. But it's important to never make that mistake again. And it's also important to share stories like that because it's very impressionable for people. When I could be up flying my Mooney and I could be like, oh, this looks like a lot what Tom was talking about. So maybe I'm just going to sit here because it did not go well for him. And chances are it's not going to go well for me either. So let's just sit here and we'll chill.
Yep.
So it can be really difficult, especially, you're early on in your training. You're like, oh, I got to get home. My wife, my kids, pushing it. Just like,
Yeah.
I think one dangerous mentality is always just like, all right, well, I'll fly as long as I can, then I'll stop. It's like, you never know. So you're always going to try to go a little bit too far. And then when you stop, it might be too late. So something to take in mind. The best thing you can do sometimes is wake up and say no and just be on the ground.
Yep. Yeah. Get there. I've felt it. I've succumbed to it. And I've gotten away with it. And so I'm better at it now. Like I said, I always tell people that the greatest piece of safety equipment you have is your credit card, right? So if you're out somewhere, just go get a hotel room for a night. It's $100. Sleep it out and wait for better weather. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah, or rent a car. If you're an hour and a half away, just go rent a car, drive back, and you can drive back a couple of days later. So
Yep, I've done that. I left my Mooney in Florida one time. We flew the family down. This was before I was instrument rated. It was good weather on the way down, and forecast 3 days later was supposed to be good weather. And then, 3 days later, the weather wasn't looking as good, and I wasn't sure. It was a toss-up. It was one of those things where it could be good or it might not be. And I told my wife, I was like, we're not going to risk it, especially with you guys in the plane. And so we left the Mooney in Tampa and rented a car and drove 11 hours home because it was horrible traffic. And then the whole way home, it was clear skies. No. It was like I was looking up thinking, like, damn it. But, I knew it was the right decision still. I was like, I'd much rather be down here looking up thinking we could have done it than be up there with the kids in the plane and her on the plane thinking, wow, we really shouldn't have done this.
Yeah, it could have led to a divorce, if not worse, right? Like, that would have been the best case scenario if you took off in bad weather, right?
Yeah, so all it cost me was a drive, a rented car. I obviously had to buy a plane ticket to fly back and get the aircraft. But, I made that decision many times.
Yeah. I want to talk more about flying paramotors. I've never really talked to anyone about that. I've been to Oshkosh before. I've seen I think it was similar to what you talked about, Sun and Fun with doing the night show.
Yeah.
So you mentioned to say like it wasn't the cool thing to do back then, but how does someone get into paramotors? You mentioned it as I rode dirt bikes, I was outside, and I just got a paramotor. It's like, did you just throw an engine on your back and a parachute and just be like, all right, cool, we're gonna just go run and up your flying?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So I saw a video on YouTube. A lot of people credit this guy Tucker Gott. He's the most popular paramotor YouTuber. But he was learning to fly right around the same time I was. So I didn't see him, but I saw some random video on YouTube of paramotors, and that was it for me. I was starting to get into drone FPV flying because that gave me the feeling of flying. And in doing that, and on watching FPV videos on YouTube, I saw a paramotor video. And then I was gung ho about that. Like I said, I sold my motorcycles, and I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I was going to self-train, so I was just going to buy gear and teach myself how to fly, which has worked out for some people. I don't recommend it, especially for the average person. If you're not, if you're just starting cold, you don't understand it, I don't recommend it. But even for me, it probably wouldn't have been a good idea. And I got lucky. There was a paramotor school I lived in Indiana at the time. There was a paramotor school 15 minutes away.
Oh, wow.
Somehow in Franklin, Indiana. And I was like, well, that does it. I'll just go there and see what's going on. So I drove up there, and they were not busy at the time. Like I said, there was not a lot of people flying. Nowadays, the wait list to get into a paramotor school is long.
Really?
Yeah. It might be slowing down now, but I think at one point there were 6-month wait lists to get into Aviator PPG and in Florida, which was one of the most popular schools. But yeah, they were booked solid. So when I showed up to Franklin, Indiana, shout out Dave, who was the instructor there. He was working out of a little hangar. He had a couple of paramotors, and now he's got a big operation there. But yeah, I showed up, and I was like, hey, I'm Tom. I'm interested in paramotors. He's like, hey, try this on. And he put the paramotor on my back, and he's like, here's a wing. And I was kiting the wing, and he's like, come back tomorrow. We'll get you flying. I was like, tomorrow? He's like, yeah. And so yeah, I showed up the next day. I gave him, I think, $1,500 or something it was for all the training. And it was one day of training, learning how to use the motor and kite the wing. This is not common, by the way. It usually takes people a week or two to learn. But yeah, then the next day he's like, "Yep, show up in the morning. We'll solo you." And I was flying the next day. It was awesome.
What were the lessons like? Is it just essentially you just like start the motor, run, sit back, and then?
No, most of your training is kiting the wing. So kiting is you're not wearing a motor. You have a harness on, and you're just learning how to control the wing on the ground. So you need some wind, and you'll bring the wing up over your head, and you'll kite the wing, and just learn how to control it on the ground, and you'll practice that way. That's 90% of your training.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, so it's just like flying a kite on the ground,
Yeah.
where you have the wing up over your head and you're learning to control it. Once you can do that, then once you put the motor on, get used to the feeling of that. Kind of, I don't know if it comes naturally, but it's much easier.
Jeez. And then you just fell in love with it, and it's like, all right, this is me flying. This is what this is my flying. This is as far as I'm gonna get.
Yeah, the first time you take off in a paramotor, it's amazing, and it is a completely different feeling than an airplane. In an airplane, you've got your whole panel in front of you, smaller windows, and you have a window. In a paramotor, the second you get off the ground, there's nothing. It's just, and then you scoot back into your seat, right? There's a little seat board that unfolds, and so you're actually sitting. You're not actually hanging. You're just sitting in a seat, and all you have in front of you is your knees, and then just air. And it is the closest feeling to actually flying that you can get to, especially because you can go up as high as you want, 10,000. I had a buddy.
What's the highest you've gotten?
The highest I went to was 7,000 or 8,000 feet. After that, it's just a number, so you can brag how high you've been. It doesn't really feel like you're getting any higher.
Yeah, just got hypoxia. Sweet.
Yeah, well, my buddy Mark, shout out Mark. Mark Honeycutt. He flew to 18,000 feet. He flew up to
smokes.
without oxygen.
And then I'm guessing the coming down in a parachute, it's not like you're coming down that fast, right?
Yeah, you basically pin it until you run out of fuel. I think he did run out of fuel up there at 18,000. You just glide down. But yeah, that's the highest you're allowed to go in a paramotor. So there are people that have done higher. I forget, 20,000 feet, but they do it with oxygen. Obviously, Bear Grylls flew over Everest in a modified paramotor. But that's all
I love how you said obviously. I never heard about that. I don't know.
You didn't hear about that one?
I don't know. That's just something that the paramotor community knows. If that's a wide known thing. I didn't know Bear Grylls flew paramotors.
Yeah. He I don't know if he does anymore, but he did. He flew up to the top of Everest with it, or flew over Everest in it.
Imagine just landing on Everest. Dude. All right, climbed it. All right, poop, come back down.
Insane.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. My favorite was always flying in Class G airspace, where the cloud clearances are just clear of clouds, and you can just, on in the mountains where you get all those puffy clouds and it's calm air, and you can just weave your way through, these cloud tunnels, and you can dip your feet in the clouds, and it's an amazing feeling. It is awesome.
What does it feel like when you touch clouds?
It's cold and wet.
Yeah. So exactly what you think it would feel like.
Yeah, exactly. And you can feel temperature inversions too, which I always tell people,
That's cool.
When you're flying an airplane, you have a temperature gauge, and you'll see, it's a little warmer up here than it was on the ground, or you'll fly through a couple of bumps. But in a paramotor, you can feel it. You'll take off on the ground, you'll be freezing, and at 700 feet, you're like, oh, it's nice and warm up here. It's a big difference. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
What do you do to stay warm? You just either shorten your flight, or you just wear a ton of layers?
Yeah. When it's chilly, you have to layer up. We fly with heated gloves and, just tons of layers, which is rough because if you're planning to fly high, or it's, in the spring or the fall where it's warm on the ground and cold up there, if you're planning to go high, then you have to layer up on the ground, and you're sweating with, you put the heavy motor on, and you've got to run to get in the air. And if you mess up your first launch for some reason, you got to reset everything up, and you'll be soaked in sweat, and then you have to get up in the air, and then you're it's freezing up there. So yeah, but a lot of times I wouldn't fly high. It's more fun because paramotors don't have the 500-foot rule, so you can fly it just over the tops of the trees. I was
gonna say, what was the most fun about doing it? Was it kind of pushing the limits, seeing how high you could get, seeing how long you could fly for, or what was kind of the most fun about a paramotor?
I enjoyed the aerobatics part of it a lot. Like I said, when I was part of the aerobatics team, that was a lot of fun. It just felt cool flying in an air show. Like I said, when we flew at Sun and Fun, we'd be sitting
Maybe we could start our own air show called Fun and Sun.
Fun and Sun, yeah. We ended up calling it Sun and Meh at the end because they started banning one wheels, and you couldn't do all this stuff anyway. Yeah. But yeah, we'd be sitting in the pilot briefing in the morning, standing next to the Blue Angels, and all the actually real pilots. And then we're just sitting there with our paramotor jerseys on.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Guys, yeah, we're here. Paramotor team is here.
And
What
there's a lot of
autograph
fly-ins.
pictures? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of fly-ins that go on across the country,
That's
which is
awesome.
great. You go to an airport and camp for the weekend, and everybody flies and hangs out, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, it was just the freedom, just being able to, you find a park that has a nice big open field. You can pull up with your paramotor, pull it out of the truck, lay the wing out, and just go fly. And it was a great feeling.
When did you realize you could do aerobatics in a paramotor? Early on?
Yeah, I was naturally drawn to it. I progressed very slowly into it. That was not my ambition. My ambition was to fly. I didn't think I'd be doing aerobatics. But after I started getting into it, and you start getting onto hotter and hotter, smaller wings, faster wings, things like that. Like I said, it just kind of happened. I started doing wing overs, and then I did my first barrel roll, and I was like, oh, that's fun. And then, I just, progressed from there. I ended up taking an SIV course, which is a French acronym. I forget what it stands for, but it's like simulated
But you got
incidents in flight, something
Yeah.
like that. They tow you up behind a boat, and you're not wearing a motor. It's just a paraglider. And then the instructor's on the ground with a radio, and he tells you what to do. And you practice like collapsing your wing and stalling the wing. And if anything happens, you're over a lake, and so you have a reserve chute. You throw your reserve, and you land in the lake, and they come get you.
Oh, wow.
I've actually got a quick story about that if you want to
Let's
hear
hear
it.
it.
So I did it in Florida, and I was down there with my family, and we were visiting my sister, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go do this SIV course while we're down there. I'm like, okay, fine. So it was just a day for me, day course. And I went out there, and it was just me. And I have a YouTube channel, so they were doing like YouTube for it, right? So it was just me that day, so we could film and do the whole thing. And it went great all day. I learned all these different maneuvers. I learned how to stall the wing. I learned how to do just a ton of things. It made me 1,000 times more confident under the wing. However, it was getting windy, and the last thing of the day that they let you do if you want is do your reserve throw, because we fly with a reserve chute. Most people do. And, if you're lucky, you never throw it. But in the SIV course, if you want, they'll let you throw the reserve so you can feel what it's like. And I was like, oh, yeah, let's do it. But I asked the instructor, I was like, is it too windy to do this today? Because it was like 25, 30 knot winds like over the lake. And it was smooth, but it was just windy. And he's like, no, you'll be fine. I was like, okay, let's do it. And so he tows me up, and we do a run, and I'm losing altitude. And then, he's like, okay, we're going to get ready for the reserve throw. I'm like, let's do it. And so, he gives you instruction, so you're not thinking about it. And then he's like, reserve, 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 starts yelling reserve. So you throw it, right? So I grab the reserve, I toss it, and it opens up. And then when you do that, the reserve chute comes to one side, and the wing comes to the other, and you kind of plane toward the ground and speed up. So I was thinking to myself, get the main wing pulled in so that the reserve comes overhead, and I descend slower, which didn't matter, right? I'm over water. It makes no difference. It's a couple miles an hour. It's not a big deal. So the whole time I'm worried about getting the wing in, and I keep letting go of it, and it keeps reinflating. And what I should have been doing the whole time is unbuckling from my harness, right? And getting out of, at least getting my leg straps undone so that when I hit the water, I can get out of the harness.
Swim, yeah.
I didn't do that. And I hit the water, and all the lines came down over me and wrapped around me. And then my reserve reinflated in the wind, and it's a big reserve chute, right? And it inflated and pulled me, and it just grabbed me by the neck and pulled me underwater, and I went under. And it was the hardest. It felt like you're getting pulled by a boat. It just jerked you, and it just pulled me across the lake. And I'm underwater, and I can't find my harness straps. And I even have a hook knife on me, but I'm freaking out because I'm underwater, and I didn't take a breath, nothing. And I didn't even think to grab the hook knife to start slicing, and I couldn't find my harness straps, and I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do. I'm completely tangled, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is it. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm drowning right now. And the second I'm done, I felt a hand grab me and pull me out of the water.
Oh, dang.
They had seen it happen, and they rushed over in the boat, and they yanked me out of the water. And that was the scariest aviation incident of my life, and hopefully will be the scariest aviation incident of my life. But I was that close, man, to not making it. It was.
What did they say when they pulled you up? We're like, what were you doing? Why didn't you get out?
No, they knew. They knew it was close. Obviously, they were on it. They were watching me the whole time, and that's why they're there, is to get you out of the water.
Jeez.
But yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing. I was wearing flotation, but it was automatic inflating flotation, and it didn't inflate.
Nice.
So it
Of course.
malfunctioned. So I
Yeah.
didn't even have a life vest on. And so, yeah, yeah, it was really scary.
Yeah. You're just along for the ride at that point. Like there's nothing you could do.
It was
Yeah.
nothing. It was it was unbelievable the strength of that chute pulling you through the water. It was like I said, it felt like a boat was pulling you. Like if you ever been behind like a boat, like wakeboarding or something like that, that's exactly what it felt like.
Yeah. I had
Except
a
you're
buddy.
underwater.
Not this isn't as bad of a story. It's actually kind of funny, but we were tubing. I haven't tubed in so long, but he got flipped over, and you know the normal thing you do when you get flipped over is you're like, oh, he just kept holding on to the tube underneath it, just dragging him under the water. But
Yep.
yours was obviously much more intense and much scarier. But
Horrifying. Yeah.
dang man, well I'm glad it all worked out, and I'm glad
Me
that you're
too.
still not afraid of flying because there's a lot of incidents like that that scare people away. You know. Maybe you thought fixed wings would be a little bit safer than a paramotor or pulling the reserve chute, but you know, here you are and you're doing great stuff. You're flying awesome airplanes. I'm really looking forward to seeing how your career progresses because being a 900-hour pilot, it's a really interesting place to be, right? Because you feel like you're very confident. You feel like you have so much time, but at the same point, you know, you're just starting out in your career. I was told when I was about 700 hours, that's a time where you can be the most dangerous you can ever be because you think you know everything. But in reality, you're still trying to figure everything out. And it's just one of those things that you learn as you go. And I think it's really cool that you're going after this and you're making it happen. So I'm excited to see how this works out for you and how the future plays out. I do want to know, as you've made this choice, to change careers. You know, you said it's not done yet, but you're pretty sold on the fact to do this. Has what the current landscape of what aviation looks like, has that made you change your mind at all to maybe just keep doing it for fun, or are you still pretty much all in?
I'll tell you, it makes me nervous, but only because it changes so often.
Yeah.
But that's what stopped me in the beginning was the landscape, you know, and I if I was giving advice to someone, I would tell someone, don't let that stop you. Because that's what everyone's going to do. And the second things don't look great or the second things get hard, that's when people stop.
Exactly.
And they don't follow through. And that's the difference between someone who makes it and someone who doesn't. So I will be successful in this eventually. I know it. And whether that is the airlines, whether that's 135, a corporate charter, or anything in aviation, maybe I find a job selling aircraft. I don't know. I just want to be around airplanes. I want to fly. And that's it. So if you know, if that means, like I said, airlines 135, whatever it is, I'm okay with that. I'm open to all of it right now. So like I said, right now I feel like I have a little bit of time because I don't have the hours for the higher paying starting roles yet. So I still got some time to think about it.
Yeah.
But I try not to let that stop me. And it does get discouraging from time to time. I'll look at it and I'll think, dang, man, am I making the right decision here? And again, what we talked about when we started the podcast was I've got this nice job. I've got a cushy role. I don't have to be making this change right now, you know, and I'm good at what I do. So I'm not worried about losing my job. You know, that creeps in. It creeps in, and it's a killer of motivation, and I try not to let that happen. I try to stay focused, stay motivated on the days, and it sucks to say it, but some days I don't want to fly. You know, I'll be like, you know, the weather's great. I've got a free night. I haven't flown in 4 or 5 days, and I have a goal, an hour goal, and I'm like, I have to fly today if I want to hit that goal, and it's insane to say that because it's like people might not be able to relate to that, but.
No, I think it's relatable. I think for sure. I think there's a time, you know, just some days you don't feel it. You don't feel like you need to go fly. And you think that it's going to hinder your opportunities. You think it's going to make sure you're not going to be a pilot. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You're going to get the hours. It could delay you by a day. It could delay you by a week. It could delay you by a couple months. But just keep at it. Keep plugging away. The most important thing is don't get burned out. Don't become the pilot that everyone hears about that doesn't want to fly, doesn't want to be around GA, that doesn't want to do anything, you know. So try to just enjoy it. Try to have fun with it. Get your family involved with it. Prepare your wife for when you finally get that 135 job or that 121 job that, hey, you know, the days I might be gone more. You might, kids, I might be gone a little bit more, but it's leading so we can see you more, so we can go on better vacation, whatever it is, however you sell it to them. But it's going to get easier. It's going to get harder. And it's just aviation. There's unfortunately no other way around it. And that's kind of what the aviation world is.
That's the way it is. Exactly.
It is. Well, Tom, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. That's all I got for you. like I said, it's been awesome to follow you. We're not too far away. We should meet up sometime at Pick and Pig if you haven't been there before. I hope you've been there.
I've not been there.
Oh my gosh, you got to go. I might actually drive because I don't have an airplane. I don't rent airplanes. Maybe I should rent one, but it's like an hour drive for me.
I'll come pick you up.
Yeah,
in Mooney.
it's so sick. You have to go. One of my favorite places. I hope someone there is listening to it because it's great, and I love the Pick and Pig. It burnt down and it's back. We got to bring cash if we go, or else they make you wash dishes. That's the only thing.
Yeah, let's stay in contact. I'd love to do that.
Cool, man. Well, sounds good. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Justin. And I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I really appreciate you having me on. And
yeah, anytime.
Yeah,
we'll have to do a part 2 when as your career progresses and seeing where you go.
Yeah, we'll meet up at 1,000 hours again. How about
there
that?
You go.
See where
Love
we're
it.
at.
All right, man.
Awesome.
I appreciate it. Hope you have a good one.
Thanks, buddy.